That's a little larger than I expected, but the whole point of this is gigantic, giganticism, gigantism. I think is how you say it. So let's go back to. Oh, I know what to play. Hold on, give me a second here. We're about to get a thunderstorm. You could probably hear it. If I open the window, you could probably hear it. So I'm in Western PA in the Appalachian Mountains, and we get these thunderstorms all the time. As soon as the humidity hits a certain level, and we're like a little bit elevated, we're about 2,600 feet here. We get a thunderstorm. So we're going to ramble about church and state. I sort of wound down my Judaism and Catholicism thing, and I came to a conclusion that we are in a post-Western world. It's sort of an expounding on the post-Christian world. We are like Constantine. We're like the cult of the emperor died off, so he had to have this like Christian 1,000-yard stare and Christianize the empire. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to listen to a little Todd Rundgren first, because I always like this song. And it's sort of Christian without being Christian, and we have to listen to the Wall Street Journal. And we're going to talk about giganticism. I think that's a word. That's like a movement. Like this guy's head, that's why I blew it up this big, is I think it was like 6 or 8 times larger than life. So Constantine turned himself into, he made a city called Constantinople and Christianized the empire and made himself kind of a new cult of the Christian emperor. Feeling me? So in America, we're going through this thing of giganticism. I just looked it up. So everybody's favorite tech bro, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook is going to build, we've heard about the one in Memphis, right? That uses, I think, the same amount of power as 100,000 homes. So that one's in Memphis. Over the hill here in Western PA, sort of between the mountains and Pittsburgh, we sit right on the Marcellus natural gas, and underneath that's the Utica, and underneath that's another one. So we have like infinite gas here, natural gas. And 2 coal-fired plants, I think they're both going to be turned into data centers, and they're going to be run by, like the one in Louisiana for Facebook, by natural gas. And it's a pretty easy process. Here's a little background music. Remember this song? It's like a nice 70s song. So we're going to build these giant data centers to run AI. When I say giant, like giganticism. The one in Louisiana for Facebook is the equivalent of 1,700 football fields. It's like about the size, it's about 60-70% of the size of Manhattan. Okay? It's going to use twice as much electricity as New Orleans. And it's in the northern part of Louisiana, as you probably know. Louisiana has a lot of petroleum. I don't know if there's still a lot of oil there, but there used to be. And so these AI systems are just going to go around America and like harvest all the surplus energy. So we're going to talk about that. It's a nice song, though. Todd Rundgren's really good. It's nice. Okay, so on Sundays we do this thing. I usually put the Christ head behind me, and we do like a church and state thing, or like something that's a little bit religious. I've been doing the Judaism and Catholicism thing. So we are in the greatest crisis. This is bigger than the Depression. This is as big as the Civil War. It's very similar to the Civil War. I'll explain. And as big as this revolution, of course, of 1776. And what I did this thing like for the last couple of weeks on Judaism and Catholicism because I wanted to say that like we fall back to the end of the Roman Empire. Okay, both Judaism and early Christianity, not Eastern Christianity, not this Christianity. This became the Eastern Church, mistakenly called the Byzantine Empire. There was no such thing as the Byzantine Empire. Some German guy made that up. But the Roman the Roman Empire was the Greek-speaking part, which became the Orthodox Church, which was eventually sort of absorbed into the theology of the Tsar, hence the name Tsar is like Caesar, of the Russian Empire. All right, so there's your quick 90-second backdrop on all this. But we are in an absolute crisis of law. And my argument is both Christians and Jews fall back to what's your Roman Empire. And our ideas of what is legitimate political discourse and constitutionality and Roman law and common law and all this is up in the air. And it's because Bruno told you this for the last 4 years of a conspiracy. Don't think about this. Mike Johnson's just dissolved Congress, the way they dissolved parliaments in the past, the way that a parliamentary prime minister system sometimes just shuts down, right? They have an early vote, the prime minister gets thrown out, and for a short period of time, we don't have a government, people. You understand that? We don't have a government, and the cause of that is not because the pendulum went to the right or the pendulum went to the left. I know everybody wants to blame it on that, but the problem is a conspiracy. Now, on Meet the Press, I went down, my dad's sitting there watching Meet the Press, and they have what's the guy's name, the Democrat of Indian descent, Ron Khanna or something, and Thomas Massey on Meet the Press. So we have this is the good news, people. It isn't all doom and gloom. So we have a whole new conversation coming about what the U.S. government is all about. It's not really about Donald Trump. He's compromised. To some degree, he's compromised. If just in the casual, off-the-cuff thing, they told him he's in the files in March, May, they could probably impeach him for that. You've resisted releasing it because you're in they could Watergate that if they wanted to. You follow me? But here's what let me tell you something, Linda. Let me tell you something right now. Thomas Massey is an engineer from MIT, lives off the grid in Kentucky, is told, you might remember, told Tucker Carlson that he's the only guy who doesn't have a handler from the lobby. Okay? Just a reminder, I was turned off last week for talking about somebody needs to be sent to The Hague or something like that, and it just took the thing down. So this is the conspiracy, people. The conspiracy is at Tucker Carlson. The conspiracy is in Washington, D.C. Mike Johnson just sent Congress home, dissolved Congress till September, because Thomas Massey put a bill through to have all the records, everything released. And of course, a lot of Democrats are in on that too. He had the votes. I'll just think this through. He had the votes, and the conspiracy shut down Congress. You feeling me? And Mike Johnson is part of it. So our Constitution is being overridden by a conspiracy. It's not an oligarchy. It's not the Koch brothers. It's not George Soros. And I'm not going to get into the conspiracy because you can just watch TikTok all day. But it's Epstein. It's the guy in Columbus. It might be all kinds of things that we don't even... does it overlap with like Diddy and stuff? I don't know. Now, the guy on TikTok, Ian Carroll, did a thing with, I think, Joe Rogan and what's her name, Candace. And he referenced a book, which I can't remember the name of. And the author of that book said, don't be so quick to connect Epstein to that small country on the edge of the Mediterranean. She said you should think of it more like a mafia. Now that's an interesting thing to say. More like a racketeering structure. But that racketeering structure goes to people like the guy in Columbus. If you don't know who that is, go look it up. Now, so I want to get on to technology here too. I guess just by luck, he bought like 1,400 acres north of Columbus, and Google, Facebook, Microsoft, the whole Magnificent Seven are all going to go there to do business. They're going to build a big Intel fab there, because we don't know how to make chips in North America, by the way. Like this huge, it just so happens that this guy who, like, all the medical facilities in Ohio State are named after this guy, and all the tech guys are magically going to go build in his 1,400 acres. He's a hell of a developer, isn't he? No, you can see what I'm implying, that there's some sort of conspiracy here. So think about that. All the tech companies are going to go do business in North Columbus with a guy who ran Epstein. Spooky. And then I'm on here and just, said like, well, if the ICJ, maybe they should take that guy and send him to The Hague, and like, whoop, and my life goes down. Because that's the whole thing right there. So I just proved to you the conspiracy and how it works on the microcosm level of little Bruno fucking around on here on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, to the biggest, half of the S&P 500 are these 5 or 6 companies that are going to go do business in Columbus. So let's get back to gigantism. I think that's a word. If not, I just made it up. So think about this, people. So the technology, I just saw some black guy make a really good argument. I sent it to a friend of mine who's an outspoken female person who didn't like it. But he argued that what's ruining the relationship of men and women is technology. And you don't hear that very often. Rarely will you ever hear in any sort of discourse in American society, television, universities, social media, that technology is destructive. Second biggest contributor to the lobby is the founder of OnlyFans. Just adding that in there. Rarely, but if you put a pin in, like, I always like to say the dissolve of the Soviet Union was Boxing Day of 1991, and 6 months later, grunge music started. I don't know how those two things are related, but I always like to add that in there. If you put a pin in 1991, the GDP of China is up almost 40x. Not 4, 40. You feeling me? Just wait a couple years later, Russia went bankrupt, dissolved, went down to about 18% of debt to GDP. Putin came in. If I remember right, the GDP per person in Russia was $2,700. It's now up to at least 10x. I would ask you this. Through the magic of Windows 95 and the internet and iPhone, is the standard of living of an average American higher or lower than it was in 1991 when the Cold War ended? I'd have to say it's lower. Life expectancy has rolled over. Household formation. Household formation is a huge factor in economics. I always like to remind you that the word economics comes from the word oikos, which means household. So the economy really runs on people falling in love and getting married and going to buy a house and buying SUVs and driving their kids to the soccer practice and buying shit. That's the economy. Harry Dent is your man on that subject. We don't only have no household formation. We don't even have. You can see it all over TikTok. You see the women saying, "Why don't men approach?" You see these lovely girls come out of a club and they're like all dolled up, right? And they're like, no one even approaches us. Then you see men go on about don't get married and da-da-da-da. And I think that African-American man made a good point. We're going to get a pretty nice thunderstorm here. He said it's technology, right? It's technology that is disrupting the human brain. The reason I went through all that is because we are going into gigantism of technology. we are going to throw remember Trump came out and said we're going to put and went to the Middle East and came back with all this commitment to Stargate, which is such a cult name, right? We have to talk about cults here in a minute. But we're going to build these massive AI infrastructures. They're going to suck all the surplus energy out of the ground, out of the nuclear facilities, out of the renewable facilities, etc. All to run AI. Again, this one that's going to be for Facebook in the northern part of Louisiana is 1,700 football fields. I don't even know how to. That's like miles by miles. We just got our first lightning. It's pretty. It's super green here. It rained all of April and May, and a lot of the corn was stunted, and then the sun came out and it's all popping back up. Anyways, so what Washington D.C., Wall Street, Silicon Valley, everybody's into AI. AI is going to save the day. AI is the big, in the words of Frank Zappa, one last great desperate suck. That was an album by Frank Zappa. I don't like Frank Zappa, but that's a funny line. So just bigger and more and more and more and more and more. Then you listen to the AI people who say giganticism isn't what you need. The large language models, think about it. There was a book sale in town, and I just took one of those unabridged dictionaries. It's about this thick, these giant ones. These large language models are really just taking your computer and say, why don't you just study the dictionary? In other words, these LLMs in these giant data centers are going to take all of our data, everything we've ever read, listened to, every dollar we've ever spent, our medical history and everything, and just churn on. To what end? To manipulate us. It's a lot like this guy, Constantine. He converted the empire to Christianity because Christianity was going to take over the empire. So the only way to hold the empire together was to make it Christian. They're trying to hold the empire together with technology. That's the book. It's called The Technological Republic, okay? And Alex Karp argues that we need to make these massive AI systems, namely Palantir, layer them in. You can go back, scroll through my thing about 20 videos ago. He's like, yeah, we're going to go to war with China and Russia and Iran. And we're going to win with AI. We're not going to win with AI. We're not winning with AI. Just like Iron Dome didn't stop the 8,000 mile per hour missiles, the AI is going to destroy America. It's going to destroy the economic surplus of North America is fracking, mainly of natural gas, to some extent oil, but that is a much shorter lived thing. The fucking Rothschilds said that they were moving their operations to North America because of fracking of natural gas. Now we're going to use all that natural gas surplus not to build homes for our kids or lower the cost of electricity. We're going to use that to run AI, which will be infiltrated by Palantir to terrorize the American people. We're all in on technology. Technology is now technology for its own sake. It's like a giganticism. That's my argument for it today. We're going to rescue the empire built on the separation of church and state, which is now gone. The conspiracy lives in this pseudo-religious world. That's how it operates. It has this cover of pseudo-protection of a religion. They just dissolved Congress over it. The President of the United States is ineffectual because of it. He's like a Roman emperor who doesn't have control of anything anymore. Technology and the conspiracy that's built into the technology has destroyed the Constitution of the United States. There's the lightning. It's pretty far off. You're probably going to hear a big one here in a couple minutes, though. There it is. There it is. So, I know I'm sort of all over the place because if you're going to do something on church and state, and remember this is the guy that merged church and state in the Western tradition, right? Christianized the empire. They're going to try to use this technology as a kind of like religion that's going to be all pervasive. It's going to be like a digital inquisition. Feeling me? Into your checking account, into your dialogue with your therapist, okay? Into your, how many of your kids have used ADHD drugs, right? It's going to manipulate all this. And if you read Alex Karp, and remember, Rupert Murdoch, J.D. Vance, and Peter Thiel just all met out at his ranch in Montana. They're the guys that are really running the show. Again, the conspiracy is now isn't just like Epstein. It's like it morphs into like Fox News and the vice president and the guy that founded Palantir and the guy who wrote the book and says what we're going to do with this. He's basically making an argument for like the Inquisition, like the ugly Catholic, we're going to put thumb screws to people and burn witches and attack England and that whole horror of the Inquisition, which was partly like a war on its own people and partly a war around Europe, right? That's why England and that's why the northern part of Europe became Protestant. With the grand, I mean, I played for you here. If you haven't seen it, go look at Finkelstein talk about, let me just pull it up real quick. He's the most outspoken Jewish American on all things related to Israel. Let me pull him up real quick. If you haven't listened to this, where is he? There he is. Just give me a second.
The whole assault on academic freedom didn't begin with Trump. It began with the Jewish supremacist billionaire class, people like Bill Ackman, Barry Sternlicht, Robert Kraft, Sheryl Sandberg wanted to...
Like, I wouldn't want to say that on here, right? I wouldn't want to say it that clearly, but that he's the guy that can just take Alan Dershowitz and pound him into the ground like a steak. He is a... So you can go back and look at my video. It's just from 3 days ago. It's a Zero Hedge article that I referenced. Colombia settled with the federal government for $200 million. The empire is literally shaking down the Ivy League. Now, wait till you hear, whenever you hear him mention everybody. I did a thing here, I think it's my second or third most popular video about Harvard University. And I said, this was during the demonstrations, and the students marched on the president's office. Well, that president has now been removed, so keep listening.
Crush the encampments, and they made it very clear that was their objective. By the way, Chuck Schumer went along with all of that. It was then acquiesced in by the Biden administration when the president of Harvard was ousted. The president of University of Pennsylvania was ousted. The president of Columbia was effectively ousted. Did you hear any denunciation about violations of academic?
So we're in a complete, I mean, I don't think, I don't have any knowledge of American history where like the top universities were threatened by the federal government. That's where the whole Bill of Rights, you can just take that and throw it on a ball. And that's what Alex Karp argues in the Technological Republic. They're like, this Mickey Mouse constitutionality stuff and concerns about, foreigners, we're protecting the Western world. He argues that the Western world has become a bunch of pussies. and we have to protect it using AI and these kinds of things where you saw when they hit the nuclear delivery airplanes in Russia with drones, and then the strikes in Iran were internal. The everything in Gaza has been done with something called lavender, which is, they don't really deny or affirm, but Alex Karp says, yeah, Israel has to do what Israel has to do, and people say, well, was it Palantir? And he said, well, if they need our software and they do use our software, that's fine with us. And what I'm telling you, Linda, is that shit is coming to the United States of America with data centers that are like gargantuanism. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? 1,700 football fields filled with NVIDIA chips and servers and data centers and so forth, just to manipulate all the data off of the internet, so we can run Palantir in there and have it overlay everything, and who the fuck knows what. They just turned off, 18% of Medicaid. And not even Medicaid, I think it was Medicare. Technology is going to be used for terror. So I want to talk about the Bruno thing a little bit. So here's my logo. As you all know, my logo is just this big black Bruno, and it's named after Giordano Bruno, who was put to death by the Catholic Church in 1600 for arguing that there's a multiplicity of universes, a lot like we described quantum. The more they study the brain, what they're realizing is the human brain has access to quantum fields, and it's what gives us our creativity that AI doesn't have, right? It's why John and Paul can sit down and write 300 songs in 8 years or whatever it is, right? They're not running a large language model. They're not sitting, listening to the radio and just copying chord progressions down and mishmashing them together and creating the Beatles, right? There's some other creative thing. Keith Richards says, they say, how do you write a great song like Satisfaction or whatever? And he's like, you're just an antenna. But I bring up Bruno because a big part of what he talked about was just to simplify it, this is that the universe is infinite and finite at the same time, and humans can't comprehend how those two things go together. But Linda, let me tell you what we can say is, even the best guys that talk about AI, like on TikTok, it's this guy named Super Intelligent AI. I can follow about 18% of what he says, and then I glaze over. He's just so deep into it. But he always points out, he says, understand that all these AI systems are just a machine. Let's just digest that for a minute. The U.S. government has been replaced by a conspiracy. And on top of the conspiracy, they're going to put in this gigantic AI-driven machine, which is going to not like some sort of group of elders or something like that, right? A machine which is going to suck all the surplus energy. And remember, there's this thing called global warming and it's CO2. So they're going to produce all this CO2, suck all the surplus energy out of the fucking ground to run the United States of America and abroad on a machine. And they're going to spend the couple $1 trillion of surplus wealth that we have on this project. Let's take a music break, shall we? Well, I grabbed my book. Oh no, play me a goddamn. Let me grab this book. Where's my book? Oh, my book is underneath my iPad. That's where my book is. So, brought up gigantic guy here, who's the origin of the Western Catholic Church, right? The Roman collar, the Catholic priests and some other priests wear. That's actually a Roman bureaucrat. It's like a guy in our day and age with a coat and tie on. The uniform of a Catholic priest is not a priest uniform. Whenever he delivers mass, they usually put something, big and flowy and liturgical on. But during the day, they're Roman. They're basically Roman bureaucrats. Isn't this fun? Let's get to the end where they get into the big chorus. Let's see if that comes up. It's not an easy song to sing. That's just him, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago. So, we have a conspiracy. It is a sort of a quasi-religion of, I've argued that it's 3 heresies working together. It's the Christian heresy of the rapture, and what's called Christian Zionism. It is, of course, Jewish Zionism, which goes back to, again, there's a book called The Jewish War by Josephus. And then there's also an Islamic heresy that is driving ISIS. And the more you look into ISIS, the more you see that they're related to the other 2. For example, Syria. Syria is run by a guy who's part of Al-Qaeda. So that's how we roll. The war on terror is all about terror. Now they're going to use all the technology to make like a super terror overlord called Stargate, which is clearly going to be connected to SpaceX and all the satellites because the new financial system is going to run in space. Catherine Austin Fitts has done a great job of explaining that to us. And this is why... this is why they brought in Elon Musk to do the Doge thing, which brought in XRP and brought in Palantir, and they're turning on the new system, okay? Now, so the conspiracy is now there for everybody to see. Democrats like to see it because they want to see Donald Trump get, pushed aside. Just remember, remember what you wish for because you might get it, because we're going to get J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance is Palantir. And, of course, the people on the right, and this woman who's all over TikTok now, she's really great. She is known as she's known on TikTok as the knitting lady. And she's arguing that America is a bunch of cults. And I think this is very, very profound. And the conspiracy in all of its glory, Epstein and all the related things, all the way out to Hollywood and Diddy and the music industry and so on. All these cults are always sex and death cults. Okay, I haven't read this book yet, but I'm going to read it this week. Now, we've known this about Donald Trump, and there's thousands of images all over social media, all over TikTok, of him with Epstein and female people from like this big to like 6 years old to like 22, and you see all these images and you're like, what the fuck is it with the 2 of them and like these, where I'm going with this. I think it's very possible that something unthinkable could come out about Trump. Unspeakable, unarticulable. And if you know, like, that's what The Shining's about. There's there was the pizza thing. If you ever read those fucking emails, they are absolutely, I won't even talk about it on here. If you know, you know. I just read them a couple days ago. They're just, you can't even fathom how violent this really is. They had a thing in the Catholic Church where they sent priests that were had sexual problems And they sent them to an island in the Caribbean, and they had like a PhD psychologist run the thing. And he eventually wrote to the Vatican and said, "You can't send me these people who are after kids. There's no way to correct them." In other words, if a priest has a relationship with a 15-year-old girl, clearly that's a problem, okay, for everybody, right? And of course they have to take a vow of celibacy. But the guy who was running this institution for the Catholic Church said, don't send me any more of those people. They are irredeemable. There is something so satanic about that human drive that up in Pennsylvania, we had the famous case with the fucking defensive coordinator for Penn State, Sandusky. I went to his football camp for 3 years. Sandusky ran the football camp. It's a true story. The year that he won, they beat Miami, if you're a college football fan, when he beat Testaverde. That year, I remember seeing him on the field, and he's running the whole thing. There's like 1,400 kids, and part of it is not only you learning football, but they're recruiting, right? And I remember looking at him from 10 yards away, and there was something wrong with him. There was something about his eyes. I'm not making this up. I looked at him and I was just like, that guy has no soul. I'm not making this up. So, okay, what the America has a separation of church and state problem in that it was founded not to, I'm just trying to review and get back to business here. And so they separated those two things, and then a conspiracy sort of filled the void. You follow me? Seeped in between religion and non-religion, sort of like a pseudo-religion of, I call it a conspiracy. She's referring to it more in terms of cults. Now, cults are also always based on sex, death, and violence. And we live in a never-ending feedback loop of you can't go 3 days in America without some sort of terroristic event. In fact, I think the operation in Gaza is not just a ethnic cleansing. I think it's a never-ending act of terror that we Americans have to live with. And we have no way to shut it down, right? We have feminism. We have DEI. We have progressivism. We are sitting on a daily basis watching this happen in TikTok, and we can do absolutely nothing about it because they're forming us in a massive trauma bond from 9/11 to Gaza to keep us in these series of cults where we feel like we have no control. We vote for silly people like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump. We vote for assholes. We know they're assholes. Donald Trump's always been an asshole. Joe Biden's always been an asshole. And we can't do anything about it. We are in the worst constitutional crisis. It's worse than 1860. We don't have a government right now. We don't have a government that can say no to the other government to stop Gaza. We have no fucking control over our government whatsoever. And the reason is we're all living in a kind of series of cults. Now, here's the good news. This woman argues that MAGA will not give up the mission, and the mission was Epstein. And I'm not going to elaborate on that because I don't really know what else to add to that until I read the book. But we may be in an absolute political showdown that I tell my dad, I'm like, Dad, this isn't Watergate. This is like Watergate cubed. They stole some files out of the fucking hotel. Who cares? Right? And pass some hush money around, like who cares? This is, and just a little bit of investment thinking here. We have this Stargate AI death cult thing permeates all of American tech. The NASDAQ is based on this tech. The stock market is based on the NASDAQ. It's like 40% of the S&P 500 are these magnificent seven, these big tech companies. They're going to put hundreds of billions and trillions into this AI doomsday Death Star Stargate thing. They even give it like a goofy cult name, Stargate. She argues that all cults frequently reference space travel. Well, that's Elon Musk. That's why when I started on here, I would just get on and go, oh, we're going to go to Mars, and is interplanetary travel part of your IRA? Like, it's so absurd. He sits and talks to traveling to Mars with Joe Rogan like for 45 minutes. He's not even that articulate. It's a cult. Trump's a cult. Elon Musk is a cult. Palantir's a cult. Zionism's a cult. Like, it's just pick your cult. We're in a technology is now going to be used for terrorism because we can't do anything else. We're going to have, like, just in your own mind, just put these two images in your mind. If you've never seen it, let me see if I can find it real quick. Google the bridge to nowhere in California. We're going to build an AI database in northern Louisiana that's the equivalent of 1,700 football fields. It's like about 60% of the size of Manhattan. That's not the bridge to nowhere. Hold on, you got to see this thing. High speed rail. Let's see if high speed rail. Oh, by the way, China just came out with a new magnetic levitating train that goes about 350 miles an hour. Here's what we've built. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but it's just, oops. If you go, no, it's not going to do it. Hold on. There it is. It's at the bottom. There's it is. There's our bridge. That's the high-speed rail in California. It's 1,300 meters. I'm telling you, people, all of this talk about all this tech is to cover up the fact that the real economy of the United States has been deteriorating since the end of the Cold War. The real investable, productive assets have left. The only fucking thing left is fracked gas, and it's all going to be used for Palantir. Which leads me to wind down on like, okay, what's the art of the possible there? Everything's going to have to be nationalized. The tech companies are all going to have to be nationalized. They're almost sort of kind of doing that. Like Intel is sort of being nationalized. But it's being nationalized by the conspiracy, not by the American people. It's not Democrat versus Republican. It's by a conspiracy. When I say nationalized, that's what Putin did to Russia. What? See, all you progressives, they've purposely culted you into despising Putin. Putin took Russia over from the oligarchs. If you're on the left, Putin should be your go-to. If you're on the left, of course, China is more obviously previously Marxist. We've been run into these kinds of cults that have led us to be in a post-Western world. None of our institutions work anymore. The federal government is making Colombia pay a shakedown fee of $200 million. That's what America's become. It's as weird as the late Roman Empire. This is an hour-long conversation about what's your Roman Empire, because America is in a what's your Roman Empire situation. And like, whenever you study the late Roman Empire, it's very complicated, by the way. It's not an easy thing to explain. Like, you can go read Gibbon, it's 900 pages of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Like, no one can really perfectly explain what happened to the Roman Empire. One thing you can say, though, is a lot of the things they did towards the end were profoundly fucking stupid. And what I'm arguing today is we're going to take, somebody said, what do you mean we have a surplus? I meant like we have like a economic surplus of about $2 or $3 trillion every year. Corporate America, the S&P 500 makes about $2.5 trillion. We take 1 trillion of that and throw it out the fucking window with share buybacks. Okay? We take another trillion and reinvest it. And my point is the $1 trillion is never even completely reinvested in the United States. And God bless him, Trump is trying to make all these companies bring all this money back on shore. They don't want to. Apple will never make as much money building iPhones in Texas as it would in China. It's not even clear they can do that. So we're not reinvesting the economic surplus into things that we need. They're gone. Okay? And then what's left is we're going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars. These big tech companies, which have, like, I just looked it up, Microsoft has revenues annually of like $275 billion. Apple makes like, I don't know, $70 billion in profit a year. It's not reinvested in America. And now instead of making those investments, they're just going to turn America into a giant digital plantation and suck all the natural gas, the excess surplus energy. Think about like civilization just in terms of excess energy. What do you mean excess energy? Well, the Roman Empire conquered many people. The Gauls, the Samnites, the fellow Italians, of course Carthage, but the big one was Egypt because they got the grain. So if you're going to push tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of troops around the Mediterranean and Germany and into the east, they have to have enough grain, right? Because if you're taking them off the farm and putting them behind a shield, you have to have the grain. You have to have the surplus energy. All of our surplus energy is going to go into this doomsday machine called Palantir. We have no fucking control over this country. Our Constitution is absolutely upside down. It's so bad that maybe like Steve Bannon and Trump revolt and like say, I don't know, like, you follow me, like I don't care who wins and loses in this whole, we're all losing right now. We don't even have a federal government. We don't even have a Congress. They just dissolved Congress. Everything would have to be nationalized. What do you mean by that? You can go study Putin. What did he do? So your first reaction is going to be like, I'm some sort of pro-Putin mouthpiece, and I get paid. I wish I was paid by Putin. And what did he do? He took all the big national industries, Gazprom being a good example, and just put KGB agents in charge of them. Why? Well, that's authoritarian. You know, if you watch MSNBC, he's authoritarian and he doesn't like gay people. Well, there were about 12 oligarchs who controlled Russia, and they were just in constant mafioso warfare. And fucking Abramovich told Yeltsin to pick the KGB guy and make him president to clean the fucking place up, or we're not going to have a country. Okay, let me keep going with that. They have a national bank. It's called Sberbank. Not sperm, but spur. It's funny to say sperm bank, but that's not spur, S-P-E-R. It's 51% owned by the Russian Treasury. And 49% owned, if I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, 51% by the Treasury, meaning the state of Russia, and 49% owned by the Federal Reserve, by the Russian Central Bank. Just think about that for a minute. So they have like a JP Morgan that's like 51% owned by the government. Yep. Our government is owned by the banks. feeling me? So, Gazprom, 51% owned by the state, has like 1% debt on its balance sheet or something like that. Rosneft, I think, is 40%. Oh, I just looked this up. Son of a bitch. It's probably... I looked this up this week because we're doing this Russia thing. Let's keep going with this. The short story is that BP was brought in by Putin to develop these massive oil fields, like the big ones we have. Like there's one in North Dakota. There's, everybody knows about West Texas. There's like the Eagle Ford. There's the Permian Basin. There's the Alaska and so forth. Those kinds of like massive fields. They didn't have the tech or the capital or the money or anything to develop these things. So they took firms like Gazprom and Rosneft, and they partnered 50-50 with BP and Exxon and Royal Dutch and Total, which is the big French giant. And then something went kaflooey where BP started to build pipelines. And the Russian government said, no, you can't build the pipelines. You can just make money till it comes out of the ground, and then we decide where it goes, whether it's to another country or to a Russian city. Get the idea? They kept building the fucking pipelines. So they met with them several times and said, now, here's the secret to all this, is BP is controlled by the Rothschilds. And I can prove that in about 90 seconds, so just hang with me. So they had a sit down literally with Putin and the CEO of BP in Moscow. And I might be a little bit off on this. And basically, Putin took a portfolio and handed it to the CEO and said, congratulations, you now own TNK BP. And TNK was the oil company that the young, good-looking oligarch who was sent to Siberia, they just seized it from him. It was the size of Exxon being run by, taken over by a guy who was like 30 years old. Okay? Like the size of Exxon. They just seized it and then took BP's assets in Russia and in return gave them, I think the name of it was, you can look this up, TNK.BP or something like that. Then this strange thing happened. What's it called? Horizon? Deepwater Horizon. They made a movie about it. Of course, they made a movie about it because they have to control the narrative. And it blew up. And the Caribbean was covered by oil for a couple weeks. Remember that? Then BP is restructured after it goes down 50 or 60% by the Rothschild Investment Corporation. And what was the thing? And the main restructuring is they sold off I think it was $30 billion of that Russian asset that they had to sell to. So the whole thing was basically just to get BP out of Russia and restructure and get the stuff sold off to Russian investors and get the capital in BP. This is what it looks like when you nationalize your economy. We're either going to be like completely colonized by this fucking horror show of Palantir, or we're going to nationalize all the tech companies. And that would be like, we just take 20% ownership in all of them. What do you mean? 20%? The U.S. Treasury just takes a 20% ownership in all the tech companies. Think about it. They're going to build this thing in Louisiana. It's going to use twice as much electricity as the whole city of New Orleans. New Orleans ran out of electricity on Memorial Day. We don't even have enough fucking electricity the way it is. And we're going to go build all these like insane, in the membrane, massive things just to run large language models. who's in charge of what these companies even do? It's my own pet conspiracy that they are run by a conspiracy. What would this do to the NASDAQ? I don't know. This would be like what makes the NASDAQ go down like 90%. Okay, let's do the other thing too, is that all of this is tied to Gaza. There's 175 countries in the world, and there's only 2 that are not signed on to the ICJ. They're the United States and Israel. You can directly tie U.S. technology to Gaza. Think about that over the weekend. What do you imply? I don't know. If there's a political switch in this country, there could be a whole pile of people sent to The Hague, just like Nuremberg. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to the conspiracy of the Epstein nightmare and the tech and the AI and Paland, it's just going to come out that it's all one big fucking thing. And if you really want to do it, you can put a pin in 9/11, and if you want to go do that, I mean, somebody should go do that. Somebody should go get some lawyers somewhere and go do that in Ireland, South Africa, something like that. Americans will never be able to do it. We can't fucking do anything. We can build a $1,300 meter bridge in the Valley of California. We have 300 miles of high-speed rail. China has 36,000 miles. Oh, I don't know what that is. 12x? 1,200? What is that? We have not made the trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of reinvestable, real productive assets have not happened since 9/11. And this AI thing is to make up for it. And it's not going to work. It's not going to work the exact same way, like the microcosm of Iron Dome, or Iron Dome, David's sling, Solomon's balls, like all these completely over the top kinds of ideas, and the fucking missiles came right through it. This is what's going to happen to America. We're going to make like this, I don't know, Abraham's anus or something, just some completely gargantuan Constantine kind of a thing, that all this tech is going to run the United States of America and everything's going to be free bubble up and rainbow stew. No, they're going to use it to take away from us, just like they say. Like Harari says, we're, how does he say it? We're programmable animals or some shit like that. And then they say, like, you'll own nothing and like it. And we have no way to push back. All right. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. Great. Now, here's the good news. Take a look at like Ron O'Connor, whatever his name is. I'm sorry, I didn't get that name right. Take a look at it very strongly. There's new narratives, thank God, coming out of Washington, D.C. And remember why they disbanded Congress, or not disbanded, but what's it called when they send everybody home? I forget. Is because they had the votes. They had the votes to reveal the conspiracy. So it's not, I know this is 59 minutes of doom and gloom, but lastly, what I would say is, when you look at just the people who are speaking, and you think it's left and right, it's not. Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene going against the thing. AOC was bought out by 2 VC guys from the little country over there from Death Star, right? She's fake. We all knew she was fake. So you're seeing like a big quick change in how politics works. Now, let's give the last word to our friends who wrote the book in 1991. That's also interesting that happened the same year. Grunge, the Cold War ends, and the book, The Fourth Turning's written. That's interesting. And they predicted a crisis from 2020 to 2025 or something like that. We're in it. The biggest change is not going to be left and right. the biggest change is going to be generational. So you turn on Meet the Press, and instead of seeing fucking Nancy Pelosi or Chin Man, what's his name? I'm from Tennessee, and periodically they weigh my neck, and it's between 11 and 12 pounds, depending on what I ate for lunch. These fucking, like, gerontocracy people that run the U.S. Congress are being replaced by people that are, like, in their 40s or 50s. Thomas Massey and even MTG, and I don't think Gavin Newsom is one of them. I think Gavin Newsom is completely fake. I think he's he just talks in circles. I have no idea what he believes in. But at some point, Congress is going to have to come back into session. They have the votes. They have the votes. And again, I'll give the last word to this woman who wrote this book, Uncultured. She is arguing, we talk about in a very negative way the MAGA people and the white nationalists and all this, and they're in the media, they're, especially on MSNBC, they're spoke about in a derogatory way. But she is pointing out that they will not give up on this conspiracy thing. That was the mission. If Trump isn't with the mission doesn't go away. So, all right, little housekeeping. So this is going to go on Substack as a podcast. I have to be careful how I talk on here so I don't get turned off, because if it turns me off, I lose the piece and I can't put it on Substack. These long lives will go on there for free. The real rubber hits the road, though, if you're a subscriber, and I want to talk about 3 things real quick before we get away. The first one is I've been in contact with a gentleman who's an investment advisor like I was for 15 years, and who's also an Episcopal priest. And we're increasingly talking about building a foundation just like all the other crypto projects. Ethereum, Solana, Sui, Uniswap, all have foundations that hold the crown jewels, so to speak. Literally the tech and the fiduciary responsibility over the code and the etc. And also a treasury of their coin. They all have their own, right? That's what Ethereum is. I think that gives me an ability to step away and do more podcasts and more academic stuff. And the foundation would oversee the development of the reconstruction company. And all we need, so what I'm presenting to you here in the last couple of minutes, you should start thinking about the reconstruction company as something that not that I'm going to do, but that you're going to do. And we'll build a foundation to make sure it's done right with a fiduciary, accounting, oversight. The foundation is not going to make a decision of whether or not somebody invests in a ski resort in Vermont. That's not the point. It's just like if you went to the Ethereum Foundation and said, what is Ethereum going to be used for in the economy? They go, I don't know. Whatever you guys want to use it for. And that's what this foundation would do. And obviously this is Bruno blockchain, but you can see the technology that's just happened in the last 12 to 16 months is the merger of AI and blockchain. So I've just presented the nightmare scenario of like a gargantuan Stargate, we're all Palestinians AI thing run by Palantir, right? It's scary, evil, anti-Christian. I mean, literally, they interviewed fucking Peter Thiel and said, like, are you the Antichrist? And then he had some twisted Faustian answer, which is what we'd expect from him. However, that was my 1 hour interruption where I have to slide the little puzzle piece over to keep going. However, these technologies are inescapable. These technologies are not going to go away. Come hell or high water, we have to use them for good or they'll use them for evil. So the battleground really is in the tech. Go read the Technological Republic, and what I argued in the stuff that I did this week is that they're using tech to replace the law. Feeling me? This is why I have Constantine who Christianized the Roman Empire. Like, technology is like replacing not just religion. Technology is replacing the law in the United States. And it's related to a conspiracy that just shut down the U.S. Congress. See where I'm going with this? Epstein's boss is all over American tech and vice versa. It's all the same thing. Have a nice week. Come on, Substack. There's a lot of free shit. I'm always like, I give 90% of it away, but I really want you on there to think about joining this foundation. And also on there, I did a piece, just popped in my head, like having a cup of coffee. I was like, why don't we just sketch out what a DAO for Gaza would look like? So I put that up with Manus. What do you mean a DAO? Like, just what it sounds like. Like an AI managed Ethereum blockchain based for-profit entity for the people of Gaza with capital raised in Singapore and Switzerland by a digital bank called Sygnum. You can look that up, Sygnum. To raise capital in both of those markets, they're huge markets, of course, Switzerland and Singapore, and to be 51% owned by the people of Gaza. See, like, Trump and Netanyahu have their plans for this. We have to make our own plans. Have a nice week.